What's up? Dan Blewett here, and I've got another book review today, and this is by my father, William Blewett, and it is called The Science of the Fastball. So I'm going to tell you about my dad's book because this thing has flown under the radar for too long. It is a phenomenally well-written book. My dad's an excellent writer, and this book was written because he was a dad watching me grow up playing baseball. My dad doesn't have a baseball background, but he's been a sports writer and an engineer his whole life. So he was starting to ask himself, why does Daniel throw hard, and why does some other guy throw harder and some other player not throw nearly as hard? What's the difference between one pitcher and the next? And physiologically, what things might be going on inside the arm, inside the body that can account for the difference between a pitcher who throws 100 and a pitcher who throws 75? Like, why does one throw so much harder than the other? And so this is a unique book because it dives in from a lot of different angles and also has a narrative structure to it. So the first 3 chapters are kind of stories about fastball prodigies. So Bob Feller, if you don't know who Bob Feller was, one of the hardest throwers who ever lived, and without a doubt, he threw about 107 miles per hour, and this was back in, I'm gonna expose myself here, the 60s, 50s, 60s. And they know this because he was tested on ballistic velocity measuring devices, and they basically put a speed detection device that he had to throw through at home plate, and it registered 98.6 at home plate.
Back in 1938 or 9, I believe, we had a speed test conducted in Chicago, and I'd like to have you take a look at it sometime.
Well, let's take a look at it right now, shall we?
Fine.
Good idea.
Also, some of the first radar gun readings in the game were on Nolan Ryan, and his plate speeds were recorded at between 97 and 100 at the plate, which again puts him in the upper 100s, the upper 100s, so around, again, 107 and 108. But both of them paled in comparison to this guy named Steve Dalkowski, who was reported to throw in the 115s, that he threw so much harder than everyone else. It was indisputable that there was an umpire who umpired like 30 or 40 years. He has his own book. I can't think of his name right now, but he said, I umpired for Nolan Ryan, I umpired for these other guys in their prime, and Steve Dalkowski, without a doubt, threw significantly harder, not even close to Nolan Ryan, to all these other flamethrowers. He was, again, purported to throw in like the 115s. And so my dad says, all right, well, why? How does this guy throw that hard? And basically he likens him a little bit to a kangaroo, where his body had this whole combination of all these sort of biological springs. Like a kangaroo has this huge Achilles tendon, which is why it can jump so high and also jump for so long without expending too much energy. That when your body's in this resonance, this rhythm, that when everything sort of recoils and springs forward in this kind of kinetic chain, the body has a really huge potential. So he feels like this guy, Steve Dalkowski, just had the natural gift that all of his springs were like perfectly in tune, kind of like a kangaroo, where it accounted for his just absolutely freakish velocity. I mean, way harder than guys even throw today. So this book is just it's a exploration of pitching velocity and a lot of the factors involved in it. It also explores things like fatigue, some of the things we could potentially do to help pitchers not fatigue as fast and to prevent injury. He also goes into outliers and slumps, and I remember him asking me this because he was looking through pitch effects data. And again, this book was written in 2012 and published in 2013. He was looking through pitch effects data, and he goes, Daniel, David Price throws a no-hitter or throws a complete game shutout, goes 135 pitches, more than normal. Then the next time out, he gets shelled, goes 3 innings, up 7 runs. He says, my theory is that because he went, 35 extra pitches than normal, the glycogen, his forearm muscles, and in his shoulder are depleted, and therefore when he goes out the next time, and he had pitch effects data to corroborate this, his spin rate is down, and his velocity is mostly the same, but maybe down a little bit, but mostly he said the spin rate seems to be what accounts for the fact that David Price throws a complete game shutout, and then the next time gets destroyed. And that was kind of a pattern when you look through it. There were lots of pitchers who would go farther than they normally would because maybe they had a no-no through 8, or they threw a shutty, or whatever, and then the next time they do terrible. So how could you have such a performance decrease after such a big game where the confidence would be riding high? The fatigue in the arm with glycogen depletion, which glycogen is just stored sugar inside the muscle fibers, it made a lot of sense. And so again, my dad, in this book, there's a lot of really interesting research that he did. There's a lot of interesting hypotheses in here that sort of challenge current pitching thought and pitching research. And there's just lots of narrative structure in here. There's some photos, and it's a really easy, well-written book that's really fascinating. If you're a coach and you're really into baseball, you're a pitcher who's really into your craft, I think there's a lot here for you to read. And obviously I love my dad to death, and I'm proud of his book. But beyond just that, it's a really good read. It's really flown under the radar, so I highly suggest you pick up a copy. The Science of the Fastball by my father, William Blewett.